Community Hour here with Toucan. The most amazing thing with the pandemic, it showed us that virtual event tools are here to stay. In person's coming back, but we're still going to see a mix of in person, hybrid, and virtual as well. Toucan is such an amazing tool. I've got an amazing guest in with us today. So, for those curious about Toucan, what's the TLDR of, hey, I'm looking at event tools or I want to take my event game to the next stage, the next level? Why would I use Toucan?
That's a great question. So we've all been at extremely awkward virtual events. We've all been at Zoom happy hours. We've all been on Google Meet. We all know how incredibly uncomfortable it is to be thrown into a call with 30 other people where we're all just staring at each other and nobody knows what to say. There's a really simple reason for that. You don't know everybody in that call to the same degree, and you're not comfortable kind of inserting yourself when you speaking up means that you're taking time from everybody else. Just psychologically, that makes us as people fairly uncomfortable. And so as a result, you get one person dominating the entire conversation, whether they want to or not, trying to call on people to participate. Toucan is a completely different tool for virtual networking and online communities. On Toucan, you get into an event space, but you get to choose what smaller groups you participate in. And they're completely dynamic. So if you want to talk to somebody that you see over there on the other side of the screen, you just click on them, you move, create a group with them. And if you want to leave that group and go somewhere else, you can just click on another group and move completely dynamically on your own. It's just like an in-person networking event. And it's our goal to bring that energy and that natural feeling to virtual communities for their events.
Yeah, no, Zoom's so great at putting people to sleep. So you're kind of like, so it seems like a natural, like, let's do something the opposite of putting people to sleep. So with Toucan, I've actually demoed it, taken a test run and checked it out. So it's really interesting for where you can really have like highly engaging virtual events, kind of like strategically where you need like highly engaging, where you want people to learn something, to onboard. There's so many use cases for it, but it's really just like easy for me in my mind. It's like, do I want something where it's like putting people to sleep, where you're really like ice skating uphill, or something where it's just the whole platform, the whole experience is like tailor made kind of like to make that happen. And just kind of like, kind of even like backing up. I mean, you're like so beyond like talented, like, and you kind of have this entrepreneur spirit. So I can almost like picture you at like 3 years old, with like a lemonade stand or your own business. Like it feels like by the time you're 10, you probably have already had like 10 startups in Silicon Valley or New York or wherever. It's like so media savvy and trained, like light years ahead of all of us. So like I assume that you came from like an entrepreneur like family. And what was that kind of like childhood like growing up? Because it just like jumps out like every time I talk to you.
Oh, well, I did in fact grow up in a pretty entrepreneurial family. But that's very kind of you to say. I did not have 10 startups by the time I was 10 years old. I grew up in New York City, and my father is a serial entrepreneur. So over his whole career, he's had the guts to start his own companies. I've seen him start companies, just several throughout my lifetime. I'm 23, and my mother is a physician scientist who is brilliant and trying to cure cancer. And so I grew up with this kind of, some might say, thinking delusional mindset that I could actually change the world and come up with creative solutions to big problems. And I think that that's really the building block of any entrepreneur, is believing that you can indeed solve those problems. And so I wasn't pushed towards entrepreneurship as a kid at all. I was raised in a household that really encouraged us to come up with kind of fun, creative solutions to everyday problems. And so I've invented quite a few board games that we actually tried to patent at one point in time. My brother and sister, I didn't have a lemonade stand. My brother and sister had a really successful lemonade stand outside the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York City, which is a great location. So we had a lot of ventures going on in our house. That's for sure.
Yeah, it's kind of an interesting market to like have like to try to be an entrepreneur. I mean, only like been from New York from like the just the more of the tourist side of the tourist side of things, you know, friends there and stuff visiting, but it's just like a completely different place and sort of like a your typical like middle class, like where you've got like a neighborhood and homes, and there isn't like you know that urban everything and subways, and it's so sprawling in New York. So it's such an interesting atmosphere. But you're like
Yeah.
this, yeah. So I don't even can't even imagine like what the tech scenes there. But then you go to like this amazing university of Stanford, which I hear is a great university. And then at some point
Yeah.
there, it's like you're thinking, hey, I really like, you know, you must be thinking, hey, like there's got to be a better way for us to do events. There's all different types of tools out there. And then at some point, like you get this like inkling or this aha moment for Toucan. So what was that process like of going to Stanford? And I assume that's where like the company like came out of. And what was that moment like? Or were you just like on a walk or somewhere there where you just had this like lightning bolt of an idea? Oh my gosh, Toucan.
Not at all, actually. So at Stanford, which is indeed a great, great university, I'm very grateful to have gone there. I studied political science and economics. So I didn't really run around in circles of people who were all trying to drop out and start their own companies. I knew a few of those, but they weren't really my closest friends. Um, it was after COVID hit and we were sent home in March of 2020 that I was just thrown into all of these Zoom events. Everybody's default was, okay, let's hang out, let's network, let's get to know each other on Zoom, on Google Meet, on Teams. And it was just over and over and over and over and over again going to these horrible events where I was meeting absolutely zero people, having just the worst time, and going downstairs to my kitchen table every single night to talk with my family and saying, oh my gosh, I can't believe I got to another one of these things today. Um, that's when we really started breaking out the napkins and drawing things out and saying, you know, what would be effective for, you know, not just university students who can't hang out anymore, but companies that are distributed now and conferences that are really lacking that kind of social networking bit. You know what they really need is they need a video tool that enables those really natural kind of human interactions that you get in those networking environments in person. And this is what it would look like. So we really drew it out. And um, so my brother Ethan is my first co-founder. He also goes to Stanford. He was just finishing up his freshman year at the time. But we have three other co-founders who are all experienced entrepreneurs who I'd never met in person, actually, until recently. And they were all over the world. So they weren't affiliated with Stanford at all. So I can't say that we're a Stanford company, but it's definitely a big part of my personal journey. Toucan only exists because of COVID, but
Right.
I wouldn't have been able to run Toucan if Stanford hadn't been running classes like they were during the pandemic. So everything was virtual for me. I could work from anywhere. I could take classes from anywhere. And also most of my classes had some sort of asynchronous component. So I could if I needed to take meetings during the day when I was working on Toucan full time, work on Toucan during the day, and then I would watch my classes at night. And because people at Stanford were at home all over the world, they needed to change the exam schedule to not all happen at one time. Like tests for classes wouldn't be within a 2 hour time period. Instead, we would have 2 hours to take the test, but we'd be able to take it within a 24-hour time period because people were in different time zones. And that was the only way to kind of be fair. So because of that, I got to manage my schoolwork and just fit it into windows that I had left by Toucan.
That's amazing. I think for college, I think just the part of like going to class, taking class, getting ready for exams, that was enough for me. Like I would never have had that. Let me start a company. I'm not like, I've got a few like 4 or 3 hours left in the day, but that's amazing. You're able to, essentially do all of that, like having like several jobs, like all at once, literally. And then kind of like you're having to like, kind of like be super agile like in your time and navigate all that stuff to get it here. That's really impressive. And then just kind of
Thank you.
for we're talking about this is a events solution and tool, and then to really sort of hit that home, like do you have like some like one or two like customer stories or like success stories where you're like this is like the proof and the eating proof in the pudding. This is how like the magic has already happened with Toucan, like with one or two like
Yes.
customer success stories.
Oh my gosh, yes. I've got more than that. That's actually what keeps me going. And we just talked about the that goes into starting the startup and being in college. Really, what kept me so excited every day was the fact that I knew that we were helping people and bringing communities together. So we have a large bank that's using Toucan with over 500 interns across all of Canada. And they use Toucan and they have been using Toucan for over a year, I believe, just to bring people together and get their interns together. Those interns wouldn't ever be in the same place anyway because they have several different locations across the country. But they have said to me, Toucan is our savior. Like we wouldn't be able to do this if we didn't have Toucan. And that's the amazing part too, is that we didn't build this to be a COVID solution, like a band-aid solution to the COVID problem that would just go away once COVID kind of got better. But we actually built this because we see an opportunity in virtual communities, in distributed communities that are never going to be in the same place at the same time. They're never going to be able to have an in-person event. And so to give them the opportunity to connect with each other in a natural way, Toucan is perfect for that. So it's communities like the one that I mentioned that get me really excited. There are also professional communities. We've had a, a kind of venture capital fund host professional networking events on Toucan to convince people to invest in their fund. And so they're really high stakes, really important meetings that are going on Toucan, but it's all about networking. And it's so great to see that the way that they raise money for their fund is through relationship building and those real conversations. And we're really proud to enable that.
Yeah, and you hit on two things there. And so the first one is a lot of us were only thinking of like external use cases, but if internally remote work is here, right? And with remote work, you've got like employee like onboarding. Every company has that, whether it's an intern program, new hires, whatever that stuff is. And now in the
Mm-hmm.
remote work world, it's so awkward, right? Because we are like stuck in like what you talked about, like in Zooms and Microsoft Teams and all these other ways where it's not the same, doesn't work, right? And so like a tool like this really accelerating like the new hires, the interns, rotation programs. So that's a really compelling like use case for a lot of like HR teams out there today, probably looking for a solution like that, because we can pretty much know that we can say 100% there's an HR person right now going, oh my God, if there's got to be something better than Zoom. Like,
Mm-hmm.
or sometimes it's just like an application, some really weird legacy tool from like the 1980s that people are using as a quote unquote social network that none of the employees or interns are using. So that's a great one.
Mm-hmm.
And then
Yeah.
yep. Sorry.
Well, no, I was just going to say that's 100% what we're seeing is HR and community managers are really adapting to this time, and they're realizing that people are used to having flexibility in the workplace, and with their communities. They're used to being able to join from anywhere and to be included. So that that accessibility piece is really important. Making sure that people have access to other people that they can learn from. So not just onboarding, but also mentorship. So meeting people who are going to help you with your career moving forward. Um, and that's really, really important. And companies are becoming more people centric, I think, especially after this past year and understanding how important employee mental health is.
Yeah.
Um, Loneliness is a big, big contributing factor to that. So feeling like you belong, and have a real place in a community and at a company actually makes you more excited to be there.
Yeah, I'm picturing in my mind like two scenarios. One, it's like typically it's like you've got these like backyard parties where like a new hires, other people are at, everybody's walking around like birds of a
Mm-hmm.
feather, like meeting people, having these like sideway conversations. Has anyone ever had that on a Zoom? Probably not. Like scavenger hunt, breakout rooms can kind of get you there, but then it's like you're going through like almost like this forced, really weird version of like homeroom where everybody's doing present. They're like, and John, you're up next. John Susie gets up. Can you hear me? Oh, let me fix this. Hi, everybody. And then they go to the next person. So like
Yeah.
in a backyard party, everybody was just hanging out. You had pictures of like people like arms over arms, things like that. So a thing like a tool like Toucan in the event space is the closest that I've seen to sort of get you there for that sort of the
Mm-hmm.
backyard kind of networking where you can feel like the stronger ties quicker, the team building aspects quicker there. So that's what's really amazing. And then for internal community teams or even like HR, as you outlined, is a perfect thing. And then on the other side of that, you're talking about externally. So it's kind of the proof is in the eating. I say like from Texas, we say the proof is in the pudding, but all my UK friends say, no, Blake, it's the proof is in the eating.
Okay.
But I'm sort of, yeah, so it's kind of, so I'm still always stuck like growing up, the proof is in the pudding. But yes, so I'm always thinking of now like the UK voices in my head for all my friends. No, it's the eating, proof is in the eating. But if you can do like an event using a tool that's high stakes, you're talking about the people here where it is like make or break, and they are showing trust in a tool like Toucan. That's like basically sells itself like right there for external use cases where it's like game
Yeah.
ready. Some of the most intense, biggest business deals in the world, planet Earth, Milky Way galaxy, are using this as a tool, then that speaks pretty much volumes for doing it. So you kind of have a mix of banks, a
Mm-hmm.
lot of different use cases for it today of people readily using it. And so for the just to quickly kind of go through, so then for the teams today, like the usual scenario, I've got an RFP. What are those like three things? Like if they only need to know three things about Toucan, what would that be? And then next, like, how would they like get involved or get up to speed, right? They're like, oh, this sounds great. Is pricing going to be a factor? Secondly, our tech stack, I'm working with this. What are the options there? So I guess on those few things.
So first thing, it's incredibly easy to use. Our priority is to make event hosts, community managers' lives easier. We, just by the very nature of the platform itself, allow people to choose where they go, who they talk to, just like an in person networking event. there's really no pressure on the hosts, which is amazing. Um, the second thing is virtual events, virtual interactions are here to stay, not because we have to do them. It's not because we're forced to do anything, but because they actually bring people together all around the world who otherwise wouldn't be able to meet each other. And that's pretty phenomenal. Um, I also, if it's okay with you, would love to just show a little video on how Toucan works, just so that people can get a sense of what the platform looks like.
Yeah, and I just like preface like, kind of like what with what you're saying is like in the real world when we're looking at events, right? It's like we're always looking for the right event for the what we're trying to achieve, right? So certain
Mm-hmm.
venues are great for certain things, like and there's so many different types of factor. But it doesn't mean like just because you pick a coffee shop or a restaurant or certain types of like event spaces that you're like gated with those. You're always looking for the right one, right? For depending on what your need
Mm-hmm.
is, right? And with
Exactly.
external tools, it's kind of weird. It's like you're everybody's stuck at that same coffee shop, and it's like we have to really tell everybody today if you're on the event team, community team, you do not have to be stuck in the shop. Zoom does not have to be like your only solution. We get it,
Mm-hmm.
like there's a
Absolutely.
time and place for it, but just like in the real world where you're picking and choosing like different venues based on need, you can add to your tech stack of different types of event tools that you may need and use, right? Finding the right scenario. So it's great for the teams out there today is like you don't have to be stuck just there. Stop thinking about it like it's the only coffee shop, like you can only have one
Mm-hmm.
tool. Nobody ever said that. We just all kind of like almost went with that, right? It's basically we're kind of limiting ourselves. So Toucan basically
Yeah.
opens up that door for so many other things that we're trying to do, either on the event team or the community team or the HR team or just these other people with like networking events, things like that. And so that's just kind of like setting the stage. So as you show the demo, anyone watching
Yeah.
today, think about your own things that you're trying to do in the context of about what you are about to see.
Absolutely. You said it very, very well. I also, you asked about three things. The third thing,
Yes.
well, I mean, the third thing I wanted to say, kind of in conjunction with the demo, is that Toucan boosts engagement. What we see on traditional video conferencing platforms is that we're really lacking engagement. So when you pop into a Toucan event, you get to choose a group that you want to join. You can learn more about the people in that group while seeing everything else that's happening around you. You can have a presenter come up and give a talk to everybody all at once. But what's really, really important about Toucan is that group interaction. So you talk about the topics that you want to talk about. You can interact non-verbally, but being able to have these small group conversations means that an hour long event, if you had it on Zoom, where you can only have one person talking at a time, an hour long event means that there's 1 hour's worth of conversation. On Toucan, we have on average 5 groups going on at the same time in an event. That means that an hour long event has 5 hours worth of conversations. So if you just let that sink in, that's way more people talking. Over 90% of people on Toucan actually speak. So if you compare that to the last Zoom happy hour you were on, it makes a huge difference. And the flexibility to move between groups makes it so that people feel more comfortable speaking up, and getting to know people, and also connecting with them on on social media, which we saw briefly when we checked out that woman's profile card. You can connect really easily on social media through Toucan, which is extremely helpful for networking.
Yeah. So do you want 0 hours of engagement or 5 hours of engagement? And so you can kind of see in that style there where you can have like these clusters of different kind of like social groups of people engaging kind of by topic or just kind of basically like informal things there. And then you can kind of like mix that in where there's can be like presenters, people basically talking, over like how we're talking now
Mhm.
or through presentations. And then they're like, I guess and then the probably the questions are thinking is within these little groups, how many people can be in a group? Is that like 5 people, 10 people, and they're all on video basically, right? When they're in these
Mhm.
groups, right?
Yeah, you can have up to 16 people in one group, and you only see the video and hear the audio of the people in your group. That way, it's just more focused on your conversation. But like we've seen, if you want to go to a different group and check out what they're talking about, you just hop over. There's really no commitment. You can go wherever you want.
Nice. And then
And
for
yeah.
the actual, this is all good and great, but this is usually the part with any cool tool where they're like, oh, this looks awesome, but what if we want to record it? And then the vendor says, oh yeah, well this is all this stuff. You can't like actually record anything here. So if somebody wanted to take a presentation, maybe not like the individual conversations, but just like
Mhm.
when the speakers are talking and actually take that recording, throw it up onto YouTube or some other stuff, can they do that?
Yeah, we have done that. We've hosted several events actually that we've streamed through YouTube, through LinkedIn Live. We've used Restream. If you, I mean, that's you can screen share any Toucan event
Nice.
and pipe it through Restream to YouTube or LinkedIn Live. You can also use recording software like Loom to record your screen as a presentation is going on. You cannot, like you mentioned, you can't record the individual groups because the way that Toucan works, there's actually no one kind of common time thread because all these groups and conversations are happening simultaneously. There's actually no way to stitch it together at all because people are constantly moving between different groups. You wouldn't know where to put them,
I feel like
which
that's
is
the magic. That's the magic. You wouldn't want to like
yeah.
massively like feel like you're being recorded. It just that would change like the dynamics. I like there's the
Mm-hmm.
serendipity of like kind of like feeling like you're just like hits in a completely different way. Like feeling like you're just back like in some real world scenario, like hanging out with people. It's like the closest thing you can almost get as far as that
Yeah.
stuff goes. Yeah.
100%.
And so yeah, so then just for the large companies, it's pretty much for the integration side of things. Like they're looking like, is
Mm-hmm.
this like a standalone product? Do we just kind of like white label it? So the companies that are looking at it, what are those type of options?
For larger companies, we actually offer single sign on, so SSO. We can integrate with any company, any organization's login and security protocol. That way, if they don't want to have their attendees creating their own accounts or logging in through Google, Facebook, or LinkedIn, then you know they can log in with their work or city or what have you, email, and gain access to Toucan. We have several different tiers of SSO, so we could definitely talk if you run a company and you want to investigate SSO with Toucan. Happy to talk to you about those options.
Yeah, it's pretty seems pretty straightforward. So having the SSO is a great option. And is there like a net in terms of like capacity that can be at any one event?
At any one event, you can have up to 150 people at once.
Okay.
But you can also host several concurrent events. If you have way more people than that, then you can host many events at the same time and have up to 150 people at each. We've
Interesting.
done that quite a few times.
So yeah, like almost like the icebreaker of like 150, and then like a different one for like the presenters and speakers, or just like or like you're talking that you could have a certain like see a population of members that are invited into it. Everybody else can just basically watch from any number of streams. They just don't get
Mm-hmm.
the different things. So you can all different ways to kind of divide and conquer there. But you're kind of like you're still like keeping it like from this like social science perspective, or there's a thought process there. It's like, yeah, we could make something like this for 10,000, 50,000, but then it really starts to lose the magic. So it seems like there's a purposeful in terms of 150. There's a diminishing returns. Like once you start to get over 200, 300 people, right? It's just like that would be like some insane networking. So is it better now? Better. Hmm. Try.
Hi,
Is it better now?
are you?
Yep.
Yes. Yeah. I lost you like a minute ago.
Hmm. Yeah, I was just so that yeah, just the point I was trying to make was just for 150 is a great number. And so for a lot of teams, they get caught up in like thinking, let's try to get 1,000, 5,000. But for something like this, the magic really is like 150 and down, like more intimate
Yeah,
setting for casual conversations, which really kind of plays into the strength of the tool. So it's while people can daydream at 500 to 1,000 to 10,000 plus, then you also say is that really doesn't make sense. That's just a whole different type of networking.
that's completely right. And I'm glad that you understand that. It gets overwhelming. If you have 10,000 of those kind of bubbles floating around on Toucan, it's going to be difficult to navigate. You could do it with the tools that we have and the sort of attendee list that we have so that you can find people within the space, but it would be a lot for you to process, which is
Right.
why we like to keep it a little bit smaller. And 150 isn't small, it's actually quite large for a networking event. So we're kind of sticking with that sweet spot.
Nice. And so, for those that are excited about this, how would they get involved or learn more information?
Go to toucan.events. That is TOUCAN .EVENTS. You'll see our website. You'll see all the information you need to know. I highly encourage you to try our interactive demo. That way you can actually try the platform out by yourself. You don't have to invite, a bunch of people. And also, once you've fallen in love with the platform, create your own space. So a space on Toucan is your permanent link that you can use. You can send it out to whomever you want. You can use it for whatever meetings you'd like and any events. It's great for companies, for organizations to have their own kind of branded Toucan space that people can keep coming back to.
Nice. And then just a few rapid fire, like lightning round questions for you, just
Sure.
as we go out. It was so amazing to have you on the show today. Just thanks for your time to get to tell people about Toucan, things like that. So the first question: you went to Stanford. What's like the Stanford like chant, and what was like your favorite memory like attending Stanford?
Oh my gosh. So Stanford has an alma mater. I don't know it. I don't know anybody who knows it, like, who can actually sing it. But All Right Now is the kind of fight song that we play at every sports game. And we all know this one moment where everybody in the stadium jumps and kind of goes woo. So that's fun. That counts as a school chant, I think. And then my favorite memory at Stanford, I started an initiative through an organization that I ended up running called Stanford in Government. But my sophomore year started an initiative called Stanford Votes. And that was the kind of first centralized effort to increase turnout in elections among students, not just students, but also faculty, staff, members of the Stanford community. And our first year was the 2018 midterm election here in the States. And we registered over 2,000 people to vote. And it was just the most invigorating thing to be a part of, and to really feel like we're making a difference in the government was exhilarating. We hosted lots of events. So speaking of events, I've thrown lots of events for voter mobilization and turnout. I think those are my favorite memories from Stanford, is running Stanford boats.
Nice. And for books, what was the last book that you really, really loved?
So I just read The Kite Runner. It was recommended by a friend who me and then gave it to me right before I was. And oh, can you hear me?
Yeah, I got you.
Okay, I got an alert that said that the signal was bad.
Yep.
I started. So I actually read The Kite Runner. It was, and he bought it for me actually before I got on the plane, and he said, "Cry on the plane," and I did actually end up crying on the plane. It's a fantastic book. It was so sad, but beautifully written. And I'm currently kind of halfway through *The Martian* on audiobook, which is also a phenomenal book, and I'm loving it. Um, it's so smart, and I, I just really admire the writing. I admire the research that goes into it. Um, and I think that it's actually really funny.
Yeah, and the guy that wrote The Martian has this book, Project Hail Mary. It was like my favorite book last year. That's if you like The Martian,
Okay.
Project Hail Mary is amazing. Those are definitely great books. And then last question. So you mentioned board games that you try to do. What was like your funnest board game that you ever came up with?
Okay, that I came up with. My family, we were at a restaurant and we were waiting for our food, and we were just sitting at the restaurant, and we had these square tables and salt and pepper shakers. We were the only ones at this restaurant. And so we created this game because there were designs on the table that were kind of concentric circles. The game was essentially like curling, but with salt and pepper shakers. And we called it Yes. And what you do is you slide the salt and pepper shakers towards the middle and then try and get the most points possible by knocking other people's salt and pepper shakers all over the place. So we tried not to create too much of a mess, but we had a really, really good time. And it was just so kind of basic, but it kept us entertained for like hours because we ended up building our own table for that game specifically once we got home.
Wow, that's amazing. Um, yeah, but thanks so much for being on episode 8 for Community Hour. Hopefully, we'll run one of the community hours on Toucan like here
Yeah.
in the future to kind of like have some mix it up a little bit. It's great to kind of learn about it for all the teams out there. Everybody's say at a different point is struggling with events, especially as everybody's having to figure out what does hybrid look like, and then
Mm-hmm.
just secondly, that struggling with engagement, like a lot of the industry reports, whether it's like Community Roundtable, CMX, is just showing that a lot of teams are struggling with engagement. And so you just talked about, you just in one event had 5 hours of engagement right there, whether it's employees, customers, community members, that type of deal. So it's a perfect tool for that. So just thanks so much for coming on, showcasing an amazing tool for the teams out there that they can use.
Of course. Thank you for having me. I had a great time.